Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome back to the Muslim Career Guide with your host Alia Qayyum. Today I'm joined with Sister Hajra. Jazakallah so much for joining me today.
Alaikum salam, and thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you on. So before we, jump on into the interview and everything like that, do you want to give me a brief introduction of who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Hajra. I am currently a lawyer who also runs a side baking business. So I actually have a background in biochemistry. I was born and raised in the city of Ottawa in Canada, and I did my biochemistry education at the University of Ottawa. I went to law school at the University of Ottawa. After law school, I worked for a period of time at the Department of Justice in Canada. And recently, I started working at a law firm in Vermont, after moving to the States some years ago. And I not only work in my legal practice, but I also bake on the side. So I have a baking business as well that I operate.
Wow, Masha, that's amazing. I didn't actually know that you had a biochemistry background, which is so cool you went from biochemistry to like lawyer. They seem like almost like opposites.
Yeah, they're very different, but yeah, it was a nice change.
Definitely. And before we do also get on the interview, I like to do this with my guests for their icebreaker questions. So rapid fire,
Mhm.
super silly questions, and you can give your most
Okay.
current and present answer.
Okay.
Perfect. So texting or calling?
Uh, Mostly texting, but I do like a phone call every now and then.
Yeah, definitely. Favorite recent purchase?
Favorite recent purchase? Well, I don't do a lot of shopping, but I bought a NutriBullet maybe a year ago, and I've used it every day since then to make smoothies and whatnot. So it's definitely something that's come in handy more than once.
Definitely. And favorite movie?
Oh, favorite movie? Okay, so I like movies from the 80s, and I probably have two favorite movies, The Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So actually, fun fact is my law school admission essay begins and ends with a quote from Ferris Bueller.
That's so cool. Favorite emoji?
Oh, favorite emoji? The face palm one of the
Yeah.
brown girl.
Yeah. And then the last one is what's one thing that you don't understand?
Um, what's one thing that I don't understand is people always being on social media.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it can be addicting, but also like it can be hard to always stay on it. Definitely annoying.
Yeah, like I definitely feel there needs to be a healthy boundary between real life and being on social media. And, if you're on it too much, you miss out in the real world.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, that was the icebreaker question. So we can jump straight into the interview now. So when and why did you decide that you want to become a lawyer?
So we've touched a little bit about my background in biochemistry. So
Mm-hmm.
initially, I actually wanted to go into medicine or dentistry, and law school was really a backup option of mine. I didn't give it a lot of serious thought, probably just right before I applied to law school, actually. But after being in biochemistry for 4 years, and I felt that there was like I liked the legal research, or not the legal research in biochemistry, but the research and writing that went into obtaining my biochemistry degree. And I felt that there were many transferable skills to a legal profession, in writing arguments and doing research and advocating for different issues, things like that. So I definitely felt that my options as to what I could do with a biochemistry background weren't just limited to something in the sciences or health sciences or medicine, although that was my initial goal. But since I wanted to move into a different direction, I felt that I could still use my biochemistry skills and training in a legal profession, whether it was something related to sciences like working in intellectual property law, or even just doing a lot of the research and writing that I do now in my legal practice, although it's not very much science related, but there's still a lot of skills that I apply regularly from what I learned during my biochemistry years. So, the answer in a nutshell as to why I decided to go into law was basically, well, I thought it would be a good transition from something very science based
Mm-hmm.
into something that's not so science related, but I could still, if I want to, I have the option of working in a legal field that's related to the sciences if I want, or I can just move away and do something totally different, like family law, for example. So I felt it was time for a transition, and law seemed to be like a good place to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot at the Muslim Career Guide. It's so cool how people can shift from like one
Mhm.
career and or like one area of career to a completely different one without much, I guess, trouble. Like, there's a lot of flexibility to being able to shift your careers and things like that. So, I mean, it's so cool how you're able to do that now, and it's so cool how you were able to do almost like something not opposite per se, but like
Very
by the
different.
sounds of it, opposite, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like I mean I probably surprised myself as well that I was able
Mm-hmm.
to, go into law school and go into a onto a different career path while being from such a, science heavy background. But yeah, there's definitely like always options to shift into something different, give different things a try and try something new.
Definitely. And how do you decide that what area of law that you want to work on? And do you ever feel overwhelmed when you're practicing so many different practices of law?
So I work in a general practice firm.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of different areas of law, ranging from family negligence to different things in intellectual property and things in between, like transactional things like real estate and wills, things like that. So working in a group of people, everyone kind of takes on different cases, and through that you get exposure to different fields. And obviously, you're not an expert in any field when you start. It takes time to
Right.
become familiar with an area. Even in law, there's so many different fields, and even though we're a general practice firm, where some of us are much more experienced in some fields than others. Like I would say, employment is an area of mine that I'm much more familiar with compared to, let's say, the transactional sides of things like mergers and acquisitions or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, you become more experienced with different areas, and you become more comfortable with that as you go along. So you can definitely feel overwhelmed maybe if you have a lot of deadlines coming up at the same time, you have a lot of things to do, and maybe you feel like you're being stretched out too thin. But I think, sometimes that happens in any job, that you can feel a little bit overwhelmed. But the key is to keeping like a well organized schedule, making sure you're staying on top of things and not letting yourself get too overwhelmed by everything that's coming your way. If you need help, ask for help, and just maintaining organization and keeping track of what's due when really helps in the legal field.
And like like you mentioned, you work at a general practice firm. So like, do you get to pick the cases that you want to do, or are you like handed a case and say, "Oh, here's what you're working on at this
Well,
moment"?
sometimes not. It depends basically like what a particular person maybe does more of. For
Mm-hmm.
example, since I started doing more employment issues with my firm, I've been getting more employment cases, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But with respect to like intellectual property issues, I probably am better suited for some things with my science background than others. So it really depends on who has availability. That's another thing as well. Like if someone's like really busy with a lot of other things going on, and maybe someone else has a bit of a lighter schedule, we can share the work that way. And sometimes if there's a similar file that maybe someone else had with respect to a certain legal area, you can always ask the other person in your firm for help. Like, um, you know, what do you suggest that I would do on a file like this? So it can really change depending on how the workload is coming in and who's busy with what. But generally, I find that if you're more comfortable in a particular area and you've been doing more cases in that field, then generally you'll keep doing more of those things, just because it's an area you also become more comfortable with over time.
I think it's nice that you have the option to like branch out to something else. Maybe if you want to try something new, but at the same time, like knowing your skills and knowing what you're good at, and knowing that what your prerequisites, I guess, what you have from before, like you're able to also be comfortable with what you're doing and not being, I guess, like thrown into something not knowing what you're doing.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
And the benefit of even working with others, even if you are, handed a case that maybe you don't know what you're doing at first, you can always get guidance from like people who are more experienced with you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always ask for advice. It's definitely a plus, compared to maybe being like a solo practitioner and working on your own.
Exactly. And can you talk about some of the major responsibilities of the practice of law?
So having well, the most important thing I would say is client relationships, because obviously when clients come to you, they're coming to you with what's usually a really significant part of their life,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's, let's say, in a family law situation, whether it involves like children in custody or divorces, or, in another field like wills and estates, a person wants to write their will, just to make sure that things are taken care of at the time of their passing. So a lot of issues that come up, if not all issues that come from through your clients, are issues that are really important in their life. So having a good client relationship, being able to understand their needs, being able to understand how certain decisions that maybe you might make as a lawyer will affect them, and maybe their families or their businesses or other things. It's really important to understand what your client wants, what your client needs, and also educating your client as to what you can realistically do as well. Sometimes clients might think that I'll go to a lawyer and in a couple of months everything will be settled with this big issue I'm having.
Yeah.
But the practice of law is actually, it can be quite slow at times, especially in the area of litigation. Cases take on, it can take years from like start to finish. So lawyers do have a responsibility in educating their clients as to what services they provide, how long these services will take, and also lawyers also have an obligation in understanding from their clients what do they want and need for that particular issue that's happening in their life right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you mentioned, you work a lot with clients, and like that's kind of a major responsibility to educate your clients. Have you ever dealt with, I guess, difficult clients, maybe like some that might not be very understanding of what's going on in the process, and how did you deal with that?
So usually the start of the process when you're developing a relationship with your client, you do like a general interview, understanding their situation. What do they want? What are some of the issues that they're having? How can you help them? And then, you know, if the client agrees to take you on as their lawyer, they would pay a retainer fee, and you would basically have them. It's understood that they're your client now, and you're going to carry out the responsibilities of maintaining, the responsibilities for their case and ensuring their representation in the best way that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'll have an interview where the client maybe does not agree with your approach of how you're going to take things or how long things might take. And that's okay. Sometimes clients, they might, sometimes it's also a matter of the personality as well, because we're dealing with people. People have different personalities. Some lawyers are very, very calm, very gentle, very, quote unquote nice.
Yeah.
And some clients actually don't want that. It's not unheard of for a client who's going through, maybe they'll be going through a litigation sometime in the future. They might want a lawyer who's more aggressive, has a different personality, and sometimes it's just not a right fit. So you can always suggest to a client that, if you feel that I'm not suited as to the type of lawyer that you want, feel free to find someone else. I can maybe refer you to another colleague or someone else in the community who I think would be a better match for you. So that's okay if a client and a lawyer don't fit well together. That's all right. It's just a matter of finding a client or a lawyer who works well for that particular client. But the lawyer also has to ensure that they're going to be carrying out the responsibilities not only to the best of their ability as in terms of like work performance and things like that. Like obviously no one can guarantee a win all the time in a litigation, or sometimes
Mm-hmm.
things might not work out the way the client wants. So a lawyer has to be also realistic to a client, and they also have to be ethical for sure. You have to follow the certain set of rules that lawyers have.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And what is the process or time that it takes before a lawyer can take action on a case?
So sometimes it depends what you mean by an action, because sometimes, like for example, we'll have a client, maybe they're having a problem with, let's say they have like a problem with like paying their dentist, or they've paid a certain amount to the dentist, and the dentist or other person that maybe they owe money to is saying like, no, you actually owe more, and there's a problem with that. So just to give you like a simplified example of a situation, sometimes a client might just come to us and say like, hey, we're having an issue with this person. and we don't want to start a lawsuit or anything right now. We just want to kind of deal with it in a different way, and maybe a more simpler, uh, less extreme way. So sometimes we'll send, the other party a demand letter saying that, we represent so and so person. There's been an issue with this. We believe that our client is owed this much money or things like that. And so sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes
Yeah.
you just need a letter. Other times, it can be much more time consuming. There's a lot more resources and energy you have to put into a case, especially if there's, let's say, like someone got fired at work. There's a lot of issues behind the firing. Maybe they weren't reasonably accommodated because of a disability. Maybe the employer is also saying, well, actually, they weren't a very good employee. So there can be a
Mhm.
lot of issues in a case, and if it involves something like litigation, like for example, some states the time frame from start to end of a lawsuit can be 3 years, and that's the average, let's say.
Yeah.
Some places, if the court system is really backed up, there's a lot of cases, there's a large population, sometimes it might take even longer. So really it all depends on what a client wants, and also just how realistically, like, how are things flowing in the court system. Like, for example, I might have had a hearing last week, but I won't find out a decision maybe months from now because the judge is busy making decisions in other cases. So time is not tightly controlled in a legal system, other than by or in a legal action, I should say, other than by maybe if you have certain deadlines, like, yeah, you'll have like 30 days for this, 60 days for that. The deadlines, fine, those are set. But in the greater scheme of things, where you have maybe a lot of moving parts in a case, a lot of
Mhm.
filings, a lot of motions, and now we have to wait to get a report from an expert. We're waiting on this, we're waiting on that. Sometimes it's a lot of waiting, and you can't really give your client a definite timeline. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I definitely was a little bit more surprised by when I first started my career as a lawyer, just how slow things can move. It doesn't move as fast as it does on TV.
Definitely. Like I think because there are so many moving parts and things like that, so it makes sense why it would like be really slow and things like that. You're also depending on a lot of people, depending on
Yeah,
just a
exactly.
lot of different processes, not just the process
Hmm.
that you're going through, but
Hmm.
other processes. So it makes
Right.
sense of why it would take so long.
So you can't always give a client like a definite answer if they were to ask, like, how long is it going to take. I can give like an estimate based on maybe like how long it took for a similar situation,
Hmm.
but that's really the best you can do.
Yeah, definitely. And now we can move on to like talking about you being like a baker and starting like a baking business. So I want to talk about when did you decide you want to start baking and then turning it into a business?
So, when I was in law school, I actually had one of my kids born at that time when I was a second year law student. And then, I graduated. I worked at the Department of Justice for some time. And then
Mhm.
actually took some time off to have two more children after that. So, in the years when my oldest had started school, but the younger two were still at home. So, I'd always liked to bake, as a child. Most of us have like good memories of maybe baking at home, baking with our parents, things like that. So baking was always like a hobby of mine. And, I'd like to make things for my kids' teachers, things like that. So the way my baking business started was really one day, there was a boutique or some type of festival going on at my son's school. And I just thought, let me, make some things and see how would they sell. I thought that I made like really nice cupcakes and cookies or like some cake pops, and I thought, I always had a lot of people tell me like, oh, you could sell these, but I thought, well, let me give it a try at this one event. So, like a good lawyer, I went to the city, got a permit to do that. Because one thing I would definitely say for anyone who's thinking about starting a business or is in a business but maybe has not gotten around to this part yet, is to always make sure you're doing everything appropriately, legally,
Mhm.
following the rules. That's always very important. So I went and got a permit, and at this one time event, like all of my items sold out within maybe like the first hour or so. So I
Wow.
was pretty excited about that. And then I thought, well, let me see how can I go about making this into like a small side business. Nothing too big, but I just want to see how does it go. And with my two kids being at home, I didn't have like a lot of time to put a lot of time and energy into a business. But as they got older, I was able to kind of practice on certain items, maybe get better at making certain things. I went to the city again, got like proper paperwork and certification done in order to make it into a legitimate business.
Mhm.
And really for me it was just about word of mouth. People started to find out about me. I am on social media now as well, but really it was all about word of mouth. And I thought, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. Like, people are really interested, people are liking what I'm making. People really like custom cakes and cookies and decorated things like that. So yeah, it began as something small while my kids were at home, but now they've all started school, and and now I've also gone back into my legal practice as well. So I do still do my side baking business, just now I manage both of those careers.
Wow, that's amazing. And did you like, I guess, take any resources or courses or trainings to help you with baking, or are you all self-taught?
Yeah, I'm pretty much all self-taught. I just like to watch maybe some YouTube videos every now and then to teach me new things. I like reading recipe books a lot, seeing different different techniques that people are teaching. And there's so many resources available online now for anyone who wants to learn how to bake or decorate cakes or
Yeah.
cookies. And really it comes down to practice too. I mean, I definitely am a better cake decorator now than I
Yeah.
was in the past. So practice obviously really helps as well. But there's a lot of resources online, and even library books. I love to borrow books about cake decorating and techniques
Hmm.
and things like that. So there's a lot of options if you're interested in wanting to learn more about baking, or even starting your own baking business. There's a lot of options online.
Yeah, there are, and it's really like we've talked about this always too on the Muslim Career Guide. The internet has a lot of resources to do
Mhm.
anything, so you can learn a lot from the internet.
Yeah, you can, and I'm sure actually that's probably how I taught myself how to like open up my own baking business for sure. Because
Yeah.
I actually, when we, so I currently live in Denver, but when we moved here, I didn't know anyone else who was doing the same thing. I didn't know anyone else who was running a home-based baking business. So I definitely taught myself a lot, and it was mostly online from where I learned everything.
Yeah, and that's great. And the last question I ask all my guests is if you could give one piece of advice to anyone who wants to become a lawyer and or also wants to start a side hustle for baking, what would it be?
So for a career in law, I would definitely say be open minded about the type of lawyer that you want to be, because I know we've talked about
Mhm.
about dealing with clients and maybe issues involving litigation, but there are other types of lawyers too. Some of the lawyers that I work with, they only deal with transactional things like wills, estates, real estate. So those very rarely involve being in a courtroom, very rarely involve litigation. Similarly, there's also careers in
Right.
policy and analysis that you could do, being
Yeah. Right.
different areas of law. So don't feel like, the type of
Hmm.
lawyer that you might see in a movie or a TV is the type of lawyer that you have to be if you want to go into a legal career. There's a lot of different fields. If you like the sciences or engineering, yeah, you can go into intellectual property. If you like um, sports and entertainment, you can be a entertainment lawyer. There's a lot of different fields for everyone to choose from, and there's a lot of different types of careers as well. A litigation lawyer in a courtroom is only one type. So
Hmm.
anyone who's interested in a career in law, definitely think about maybe what type of areas of law would interest you. And always a good idea is maybe to even shadow or do an internship with a lawyer who maybe practices in that area, to get an idea like, well, is this something you would like to do for your career? And as for baking, I would definitely say the first step is to become really good at what you make and what you plan on offering. Because I have seen people, they'll want to sell cakes and cupcakes, but then they won't really have a good basic cupcake recipe, and they'll ask someone else like, well, I want to sell these, but like I don't have a recipe. And really, when you're making your own business and selling your own product, you need to be able to have a good product that people will want to buy. You can't depend on someone else for doing the work for you. You need to have a good cake, a good tasting cake, a good looking cake, and being able to tell people why they would want something like that for their
Sure.
next event. So definitely being like an independent business owner, there's a lot of things that you have to do on your own. Obviously, if you have a storefront with many employees, it's different. But if you're someone who wants to do something on your own, you have to learn how to do your own marketing, do your own profit loss expenses, things like that. You have to be really smart about how much time you're spending on making something and how much you're charging for it too. That's a
Hmm.
big area that a lot of people kind of struggle with, especially at the beginning, because oftentimes you might not accurately uh, estimate how much time it's actually going to take to make a cake, and then you've charged really little for it, and you spent a lot of time on it. So that's not always to your benefit, right? So you need to be smart and really have a good plan on what do you want to make. Whatever you want to make, become really good at making that. Have a good product. Do all the necessary paperwork, to become a legitimate business. Um, get some good marketing done for your business and your items. And you can't, another thing that maybe surprises people is that you can't always depend on your friends and family to be buying your things.
Yeah.
So be open about like who you can market to beyond just your friends and family, and what service can you provide that people would be really interested in. So
Mhm.
so you should have a good plan laid out, as to how you want to go about approaching your business. And it takes time to set it up. So don't be impatient, or don't get discouraged if at first, you're not selling anything or people aren't liking what you're selling. But just, invest the time to make sure that you're making a quality product and that people are going to want to enjoy coming back to.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have so much, Sister Hajra. That was some awesome advice, and also for this whole interview, because I'm sure people in Shallow will learn a lot from this. So, where can everyone find you, whether that's on social media or anything like that?
So I have a website. It's justuscupcakes.com. So that's more of my website, where if someone wanted to look at my gallery of items, or if they wanted to place an order, if they were local, that's my website. But if you just want to find me on social media and give me a follow and see what I've been making, things like that. So you can find me on Instagram at Just Us Cupcakes. That's JUSTUSCUPCAKES. And funny story is, Justice Cupcakes is actually, the word Justus is a play on the word justice, and my logo is scales with two cupcakes. So I wanted to kind of tie that into my legal career as well. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful being on, and I hope it was beneficial to everyone who's been watching.
Inshallah, yeah, definitely. And we'll leave the links in the description box down below, along with some camps links. And inshallah, we will see you guys all next Thursday. Assalamu alaikum.